Professional wrestling is the one true sport. Other sports have their share of intense, dramatic moments, but nothing can compare with professional wrestling. Welcome to Wrestling History X, where three friends come together to talk about the stories behind the matches. I'm Matt.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Shane.
This is episode 286, Dusty Finish, Volume 4.
And you know what that means.
Means clip show style?
Yeah.
So
It means we finished a year.
It does mean we finished a year.
At this point, like before it meant like, okay, well...
This is the end of our season, but it's also the end of a year because
that's how we do it now.
There are so many shows we have to watch during a single year at this point.
The amount of wrestling on television and pay-per-views ramps up, and we try to keep about a year for a year. And these are Matt's wonderful stories and reminders of the people we see, we know, we love. Some of them we don't love so much.
Yes, and...
But it doesn't mean they're not important.
Yeah, they might. Well, yeah, I guess they're slightly important. They might not be as important as others.
Hey, if Matt ever does one on Buff Bagwell, we riot.
Trying to think.
He didn't ever win.
Yeah, he never won.
I'm well aware, but I'm just saying, like if it ever gets that thin.
If I remember looking, he may have won a U.S. title at some point, maybe in like 2000 or something like that. If we ever get to that point where we're doing secondary belts, then
we've got the Intercontinental to go through first.
Now you can do like 80s tag team, but like you can't do Buff Bag.
No.
So basically, Dusty Finishes for this season started in episode 235 with the early days of ECW in 1992. And we're going to make our way all the way to late 1996 in this group of Dusty Finishes.
Yeah, you're almost catching up with ourself.
I mean, yeah, we're basically only a year behind with the Dusty Finishes at this point. So we'll take a break from Dusty Finishes for a little while and let those fester in the background a little bit.
You're going to make our brains work, aren't you? We're going back to trivia.
Oh, yeah. We are definitely going back to trivia.
Oh, shite.
Oh, trivia, where the listeners don't know, but it takes so long sometimes. We're just staring at the wall and trying to scratch the back of our brain with our thoughts.
But before we get to that, let's enjoy some Dusty Finishes.
That's right. Let me get my Matt voice on here. And now, story time with Matt.
After Ric Flair had vacated the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship, the NWA put it up for grabs during the G1 Climax in 1992, with Masahiro Chono becoming the newest champion. Masahiro would make his way to Fantastic Story in Tokyo Dome on January 4th, 1993, to face the reigning IWGP Heavyweight Champion Great Muta for a title versus title match. The two men would go back and forth when Muta would take the fight outside of the ring to use guardrails and running lariats on the long ramp, followed by multiple suplexes back inside the ring. The Great Muta would hit his handspring back elbow and go for a moonsault, but Chono would move in time and lock on the STF until Muta could crawl his way to the ropes. Masahiro continues with a Yakuza kick, a flying shoulder block, and a power bomb for a near fall. But the Great Muta would recover to go for another moonsault, with Chono getting his knees up this time, followed by going for another flying shoulder block, which Muta would avoid. Masahiro would be taken down by a backbreaker, allowing the Great Muta to finally hit a pair of moonsaults for the pin, beginning Muta's first reign as NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. He would then head to the United States to meet a challenger from WCW the very next month. The Great Muta had become the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion in the Tokyo Dome, but now headed to Asheville, North Carolina for Super Brawl 3 On February 21st, 1993, he would face a former Horseman. Barry Windham, born 1960, is a second-generation wrestler, trained by his father Blackjack Mulligan and Harley Race. He would debut in San Angelo, Texas against J.J. Dillon in 1979. Much of his early career was in championship wrestling from Florida, even winning the NWA Florida United States Tag Team Championship 3 times with his brother-in-law, Mike Rotunda. The tag team would move to the World Wrestling Federation in late 1984, debuting as the U.S. Express, quickly making an impact and becoming the WWF Tag Team Champions multiple times, but would lose them at the first ever WrestleMania. Windham would shift to Jim Crockett Promotions in the fall of 1986, having memorable matches with the Nature Boy Ric Flair, including 3 5-star matches, according to Dave Meltzer. Barry would eventually shift back to the tag team division, this time with Ron Garvin, capturing the NWA United States Tag Team Championship. But after losing those belts, Windham would then become the first NWA Western States Heritage Champion, defending it against the likes of Rick Steiner, Big Bubba Rogers, until losing to Larry Zbyszko at Bunkhouse Stampede. Barry would then join forces with Lex Luger, who had just been kicked out of the Four Horsemen, to take on the legendary tag team of Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. But Windham would betray Luger and be invited to join the Horsemen. With his new backing, Windham would win the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship, defending against Brad Armstrong, Dusty Rhodes, Sting, and Bam Bam Bigelow over the course of his 9-month reign. Barry would end up dropping the belt to his rival, Lex Luger, at Chi-Town Rumble in 1989, followed by his contract with JCP expiring, so Windham would head back to the WWF for a short run. Barry would return to the Four Horsemen by the summer of 1990, spending his time teaming with Arn Anderson and Sid Vicious. But after Ric Flair was fired from WCW, the World Heavyweight Championship would be vacated, so Windham would meet his rival Lex Luger for it at the Great American Bash in 1991, only to be unsuccessful. The Horsemen would also fall apart at this point, leading Barry to feud with the new Dangerous Alliance over the WCW World Tag Team and WCW World Television Championships into 1992, before also feuding with the Miracle Violence Connection over the unified WCW NWA tag belts. Windham would then make his challenge for the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship and win it for the first time. After the match, returning Ric Flair would try to place the belt around Barry's waist, only for him to realize who it was and stomp away. Windham would then become a lone wolf, feuding with his former Horseman partners, leading to a match with the dirtiest player in the game. Big Van Vader had won the WCW World Heavyweight Championship at a house show in Baltimore at the end of December, and now would take it across the pond to the United Kingdom for a tour where he would face Sting on March 11th, 1993 at Wembley Arena. The Stinger would cut off Harley Race's interference before catching Vader coming off the top rope with a power slam to become champion for the second time. The tour would continue throughout the United Kingdom, ending in Dublin, Ireland at The Point on March 17, 1993, where Sting would face the former champion, attempting to win his title back. Vader would use his size and power advantage early on with avalanche attacks and short-arm clotheslines. But Sting would fire back with drop kicks and clotheslines of his own to take the fight to the outside, where Race would look to get involved, only for the Stinger to avoid, causing Harley to take a clothesline from Big Van Vader. A missed drop kick by Sting back inside the ring put Vader in control, nailing suplexes and splashes before coming off the top rope. But again the Stinger would catch him with a power slam, only for Vader to kick out. Sting wasn't able to capitalize on the momentum shift as Vader would knock him out to the floor before continuing the punishment inside the ring with more avalanches and slams. The big man would hit a Vader bomb, with Harley calling for another, but this time the Stinger moves in time, allowing him to fire up with a kapoo kick and a pair of DDTs. Sting would keep up the attack with a German suplex and a Stinger splash, and the ref would try to get the two men out of a corner, only to be knocked down, allowing Sting to try for another splash. But this time Race would move Vader in time, causing the Stinger to hit the ring post. Vader would nail a powerbomb to become the WCW World Heavyweight Champion for the third time. Big Van Vader would then feud with Cactus Jack, Davey Boy Smith, and Sid Vicious throughout the year, until a man would put his career on the line to get another title shot. The Sandman had captured the ECW Heavyweight Championship, but now in Radnor, Pennsylvania, on April 3rd, 1993, he would face the previous champion, Don Muraco. The two competitors would fight in and out of the ring with neither gaining an advantage until Don would deliver a low blow. Sandman would escape a tombstone piledriver to connect with the clothesline, but would be tripped up by Paul E. Dangerously from the apron. Rockin' Rebel would then come down to help out Muraco, only for Sandman to nail a DDT, followed by the ref being taken out. This would allow the Sandman to lock on a sleeper, but Paul E. would get involved again with a cell phone shot, causing Don to fall on top of Sandman to become a two-time ECW Heavyweight Champion. Don Muraco would defend the belt over the next few months when a fellow legend would show up in ECW. Bret Hart had won the WWF Championship a few months prior and was making his way to WrestleMania 9 in Las Vegas, Nevada on April 4th, 1993, to face his biggest opponent yet. Yokozuna, born 1966, into a family full of wrestlers, as his uncles were the Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika, who would train him from an early age. Yoko would spend time in Japan and Mexico before his first major exposure in the United States was in the AWA, where he was given credit for breaking Greg Gagne's leg, ending his career. Zuno would debut in the WWF in October of 1992 under the management of Mr. Fuji, and it would immediately rocket to the top, winning the 1993 Royal Rumble, followed by being in the first match in Monday Night Raw history. For his accomplishments, Yokozuna would be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. And after winning the WWF Championship in the desert, he wouldn't have to wait long for his first challenge, as a returning megastar would appear. Yokozuna had been crowned WWF Champion at WrestleMania 9 on April 4th, 1993, after his manager, Mr. Fuji, had thrown salt in the eyes of Bret Hart, allowing Yoko to roll him up. As Zuna would celebrate with the belt, Hulk Hogan would come down to protest the finish and check on the Hitman. Mr. Fuji would issue a challenge, and Bret would give his approval to the Hulkster. So Hogan would enter the ring, with Yoko grabbing him from behind to hold him, with Fuji again throwing more salt, only for Hulk to duck, causing Yokozuna to be blinded. So Hogan would hit a clothesline and a leg drop to become WWF Champion for the 5th time. The Hulkster would then grant a rematch to Yokozuna in just a few months. Hulk Hogan had accepted the challenge and won the WWF Championship at WrestleMania 9. But Yokozuna would be a thorn in his side until they would meet again at the King of the Ring on June 13th, 1993. Yoko would use his size advantage early on, but after a missed corner splash, the Hulkster would counter with mounted punches and clotheslines. Hogan would even try to slam Zuna a couple of times, but just couldn't lift him, hurting his back in the process. Yokozuna would focus on the back with a bear hug and a belly-to-belly suplex, only for Hogan to begin to Hulk up. 3 big boots would finally knock Yoko down to the mat, followed by a leg drop, but Zuna kicks out. The Hulkster goes to hit another leg drop when a photographer has jumped on the apron to get a closer look. So Hogan questions what he's doing, when the camera would explode in Hogan's face, and Yokozuna would hit a throat chop and a leg drop for the pin to become the WWF champion for the second time. Yoko would face numerous challengers, such as Lex Luger and The Undertaker, until a rematch from the previous WrestleMania would become the focus. Barry Windham had won the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship, with the Nature Boy Ric Flair coming out to help him place it around his waist. But the Lone Wolf had decided this was all mind games and would feud with the Horseman, leading to a title defense with Nate at Beach Blast on July 18th, 1993. The two men would fight in and outside the ring to start until Windham would take control with a Samoan drop, a power slam, and a superplex, but would then miss a flying elbow. The Nature Boy would fight back with a crossbody and a back suplex before locking Barry in the figure four. Windham would reach out for the ropes, but his shoulders would be on the mat for the pin, making Ric Flair a 9-time champion. The next few months, tensions would arise between WCW and the NWA, causing World Championship Wrestling to withdraw from the partnership, forcing them to change the name of the Big Gold Belt title to the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship. The Nature Boy would go on to face a ravishing opponent in the near future, while the NWA would find a new partner soon, only to run into a few more problems. Don Morocco, with the help of the Dangerous Alliance, had won the ECW Heavyweight Championship, but would now face a former rival in Tito Santana on August 8th, 1993. Tito Santana, born 1953 in Texas, would play college football at West Texas State, which was quarterbacked by Tully Blanchard.
Oh, wow.
This friendship would lead to Tito making his way to professional wrestling to train under Hiro Matsuda and Bob Orton, debuting in 1977 for Championship Wrestling from Florida. He would work the late 70s throughout the territories and even in Japan, before making his way to the WWF in 1979. Santana would team with Ivan Putski to win his first belt in the WWF Tag Team Championships, before leaving to travel the world in different promotions. He would return in 1983 to feud with the Magnificent Morocco, becoming the first Mexican-American to win the WWF Intercontinental Championship. Tito would then feud with Greg the Hammer Valentine afterwards, leading to them trading the belt over the next couple of years. Santana would finally get the best of Valentine inside of a steel cage in 1985, but the Hammer would destroy the belt, forcing the WWF to get a new title. Tito would then hold on to the championship until he would meet a newcomer, Macho Man Randy Savage. After this run, Santana would team with Rick Martel to form Strikeforce to win the Tag Team Championships. But Martel would eventually turn on his partner, leading to an extended feud. Tito would turn his attentions back to the Intercontinental Championship, but would lose to Mr. Perfect in the finals of a tournament. He would stay with the WWF until 1993, being one of only 2 men to appear at the first 9 WrestleManias. For his accomplishments, Santana has been inducted into the Professional Wrestling and WWE Hall of Fames. Tito's time in ECW was short, and soon a new champion would arise in the emerging promotion. Tito Santana had won the Eastern Championship Wrestling Heavyweight title from Don Morocco a month prior, and was scheduled to be in Roanoke, Virginia on September 9th, 1993, versus Shane Douglas. But Tito no-showed the event, forcing President Todd Gordon to declare Shane the new champion. Shane Douglas, born 1964 in New Brighton, Pennsylvania, as one of 6 children to a veteran of World War II. After college, he would train under Dominic DeNucci alongside Mick Foley in the mid-80s, working various WWF tapings before becoming a champion in the Universal Wrestling Federation in 1987. By the next year, Shane had signed with WCW, becoming a dynamic dude with John Laurinaitis, feuding with the Midnight Express until 1990, when both members of the tag team left the company. Douglas would debut in WWF later in the year as Marty Jannetty's partner, while Shawn Michaels was out injured. His biggest performance came in the 1991 Royal Rumble, lasting almost 30 minutes. Shane Douglas would return to WCW in late 92, teaming with Ricky Steamboat to win the NWA and WCW World Tag Team Championships, feuding with the Hollywood Blondes, until his departure to Eastern Championship Wrestling, making his debut on August 24th, 1993. For his accomplishments, Shane has been inducted into the Hardcore Hall of Fame. Douglas would defend the title versus All Contenders, when a homicidal maniac would challenge very soon. After Ric Flair had won the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship from Barry Windham, WCW had withdrawn from the NWA, changing the belt's title to the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship. The Nature Boy's first challenger came in Ravishing Rick Rude at Fall Brawl 1993 on September 19th. Rick Rude, born 1958 in St. Peter, Minnesota, where he attended high school with Tom Zink, Nikita Koloff, Kurt Hennig, John Nord, and Barry Darsow. Rick would begin training under Eddie Sharkey after college, making his debut in 1982 in Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, working his way through numerous territories such as Vancouver, Georgia, and Memphis. Rude would head to World Class Championship Wrestling in Dallas, Texas, where he would feud with Kevin Von Erich and Chris Adams, becoming the promotion's first world champion, but would soon move on to a short stint in Jim Crockett Promotions before making his biggest splash in the WWF. Bobby Heenan would have his newest addition debut in 1987, feuding with Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, before moving on to Jake the Snake Roberts, where Rick Rude would use the likeness of Roberts' wife on his tights to anger him. Rick would win the WWF Intercontinental Championship from the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 5, but would drop it back to him after Roddy Piper interfered in a match. By 1990, Rick Rude was in the main event versus his old nemesis, the Ultimate Warrior, but wouldn't win the heavyweight title. And after a disagreement with Vince McMahon, Rick would leave the WWF and make his way to WCW, where he would debut as the Phantom, leading the Dangerous Alliance and winning the United States Heavyweight Championship, feuding with Sting and Ricky Steamboat. Rick Rude was forced to forfeit the belt after a neck injury kept him out for several months, leading to him switching his goal to the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. For his accomplishments, Rick is a WWE Hall of Famer. Rude would face many challengers, even taking the title across the ocean to face some of Japan's best. The Great Muta had won the IWGP Heavyweight Championship over a year ago, when he came to the G1 Climax Special 1993 to face his fellow Three Musketeer, Shinya Hashimoto, in Nagoya, Japan, on September 20th. Hashimoto, born 1965 in Yokohama, Japan, trained in judo and karate in his late teens before joining the New Japan Dojo in April of '84. He would make his debut at the age of 19 in September 1984 before doing his excursion in Canada at Stampede Wrestling in Puerto Rico in World Wrestling Council. Once he returned to Japan in 1988, he would climb his way up the ladder, taking part in the first Tokyo Dome show in a tournament for the title, losing to Big Bam Vader in the finals. Shinya would team with Masa Saito in late '89 to win the IWGP Tag Team Championships, holding them until losing the belts to Muta and Chono. By '91, Hashimoto and his fellow Musketeers would cement their status as the Aces during the G1 Climax, as they were the top three competitors. For his accomplishments, Shinya Hashimoto has been inducted into the New Japan Greatest Wrestlers, the NWA, and Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fames. He would hold the title over the next few months when a legend would challenge. Shane Douglas had been ECW Heavyweight Champion for 3 weeks when he would face a debuting Maniac at the NWA Bloodfest in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on October 2nd, 1993. Sabu, born 1964, trained under his uncle the Sheik, making his debut in 1984, wrestling in the majority of U.S. territories before making his way to Frontier Martial Arts Wrestling in Japan, where the promotion is well known for its hardcore barbed wire matches, which would lead to Sabu to be covered in scars on his arms and torso. Now, during the match, Douglas would be distracted by Paul E. dangerously, allowing Sabu to hit a belly-to-belly suplex, followed by a moonsault, to become champion for the first time. For his accomplishments, Sabu is a hardcore Hall of Famer, and the Homicidal One would defend the championship over the next few months, when a former NWA World Champion would make a challenge at the end of the year. Sabu had been the ECW Heavyweight Champion for the past couple months, when Terry Funk would challenge for the title at Holiday Hill on December 26, 1993. The fight would spill out to the floor immediately for chairs to be used, only for Funk to respond with multiple piledrivers once back in the ring. The Homicidal One would use his high flying to deliver Air Sabu in a split-legged moonsault for a near fall. A table would end up in the ring with Terry and the ref being tossed into it several times, with Funk falling out to the floor, only for Sabu to then leap out with a moonsault. Paul E. dangerously would nail Terry, while Shane Douglas would come out to attack the Homicidal One, only then for the lights to go out. But when they came back on, Funk was on top of Sabu, with Douglas dragging the ref over for the pin to make Terry Funk the new champion. All three men would then feud over the next few months, leading to an ultimate challenge. Big Van Vader was the WCW World Heavyweight Champion for the past 9 months, when the Nature Boy Ric Flair would put his career on the line at Starrcade on December 27th, 1993. Vader would use his power early on, beating down Nate in a corner, before dropping him on a guardrail outside the ring. Big Van Vader would miss an avalanche attack, but interference from Harley Race would allow Vader to maintain control with suplexes, power slams, and a Vader bomb. Flair would begin to fire up and start working the leg, ramming it against a ring post and using a chair several times, before finally locking in the figure 4. But Big Van Vader was able to make the ropes to break the hold. The Nature Boy would then avoid a Vader salt and a diving headbutt from Harley, hitting a running forearm and some chops, only for Big Van Vader to go for another power move. But Flair trips up Vader into a roll-up for the pin to become the WCW World Heavyweight Champion for the second time. Nate would feud with his old rival, Ricky Steamboat, over the next few months, before a new arrival to WCW would make history-making waves. Rick Rude was the WCW International World Heavyweight Champion for the past 6 months, when he would head to Tokyo, Japan to face Hiroshi Hase during the Hyper Battle Tour on March 16, 1994. Hase, born 1961, represented Japan at the 1984 Summer Olympics in Greco-Roman wrestling, before pursuing a professional career, training under Riki Choshu, followed by excursions in Puerto Rico and in Stampede Wrestling in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. He would return to Japan, where Hiroshi would win the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship in 1987 and 1989, before graduating to the heavyweight scene. Hiroshi Hase would team with Kensuke Sasaki to win the IWGP Tag Team Championships in 1990 and 1991. He would then be involved in a classic encounter with the Great Muta, where due to the blood that was shed during the match, the Muta scale was created. However, that encounter would bring the two men close enough to team up and become tag team champions in late 91. Hase would then turn his attention to singles action by 93, where he would make the finals of the G1 Climax. For his accomplishments, Hiroshi would be inducted into the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. After Hiroshi Hase defeated the Ravishing One to win the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship, Rick Rude would make sure he got his rematch by the end of the Hyper Battle Tour. Yokozuna had been WWF Champion for the past 9 months, coming into WrestleMania 10 on March 20th, 1994. He was scheduled to face the winner of the Royal Rumble, but it would end in a controversy, forcing Yoko to possibly face 2 different opponents. Lex Luger would win a coin toss and face Zuna first, with Mr. Perfect as a special guest referee. It would be a back-and-forth battle when Lex would attempt to slam, only for his back to give away, causing Zuna to land on top for a near fall. Yokozuna would expose a turnbuckle, but a reversed whip by Luger would send Yoko into the exposed steel, before successfully slamming Zuna and nailing a running forearm. Mr. Fuji and Jim Cornette would both jump to the apron to distract Perfect, which would frustrate Lex, so he would shove the ref, causing a disqualification and allowing Yokozuna to move on to the main event versus Bret the Hitman Hart. Yoko would use his size advantage early on in this match, until Bret would avoid a splash and take down Zuna with forearms, making a cover, only for Cornette to pull this match's special referee, Roddy Piper, out to stop the count.
I mean, come on, Cornette.
This would allow Yokozuna to regain control with a leg drop and a belly-to-belly suplex, dragging the Hitman to a corner for the bonsai drop, only for Yoko to lose his balance on the ropes, allowing Hart to make the cover for the pin to become WWF Champion for the second time. Bret would then begin a feud with his brother, Owen Hart, who would bring in a former WWF Champion to help in his cause. Hiroshi Hase had defeated Rick Rude for the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship at the beginning of a tour in Japan, but the Ravishing One had demanded a rematch on March 24th, 1994. The champ would swing Rude around and around in a giant swing, leaving both men dazed and struggling to get back to their feet. But once they were, the two competitors would trade clotheslines, followed by Hase Uranagi and a pile driver. Hiroshi would head up top to nail a flying elbow drop and several more Uranagis, only to see the Ravishing One kick out. Hase kept up the attack with a body slam before climbing the ropes, when Rick's lovely manager would distract him, allowing Rude to knock Hase down and deliver a superplex. Make the cover, but Hiroshi would get a boot on the ropes. The Ravishing One would wear down Hase with a full Nelson facebuster before applying a butterfly lock that would force Hiroshi to submit, making Rude a 2-time champion. The Ravishing One would go on to feud with a former world champion back in the States. Terry Funk had become the ECW champion after defeating Sabu and began feuding with Shane Douglas and his crew. Terry would call in a few friends of his own to help him for an Ultimate Jeopardy steel cage match on March 26, 1994 in Devon, Pennsylvania. Each participant would have a stipulation placed on them, ranging from head forced to be shaved, never being able to team together again, and losing the championship belt. Everybody would brawl in and around the ring when Funk would have Mr. Hughes in a spinning toe hold, only for the franchise to tie a plastic bag around the head of Terry, followed by a pile driver for the pin to become the ECW champion for the second time. Douglas would fend off all challengers over the next few months, leading ECW towards the biggest night in the promotion's history. Shinya Hashimoto had been the IWGP Heavyweight Champion for the past 6 months when he would make his way to Battle Line Kyushu in Hiroshima, Japan on April 4th, 1994, to face the most decorated champion in New Japan's history, Tatsumi Fujinami. An intense affair would break out as Tatsumi would keep his distance early on, preventing an assault by taking Shinya to a corner, working him over with lefts and rights. But Hashimoto would respond like a demon, kicking Fujinami in the face, the back of the head, and in the corner, before tossing him to the middle of the ring, leaving Tatsumi motionless in the ring. Shinya would go to pick up Fujinami, only for Tatsumi to cradle up Hashimoto for the pin, to become the IWGP Heavyweight Champion for the 5th time. Fujinami would be forced to rematch with the former champion the very next month. Ravishing Rick Rude had returned from Japan with the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship, going right back into a feud with Sting. But Rude wasn't willing to give the Stinger a title shot until the Ravishing One was tricked into signing a contract for the match, while he thought he was signing an autograph for a fan. The match would take place on April 17th, 1994, at Spring Stampede in Rosemont, Illinois. Sting would immediately attack when Rude entered the ring, but the Ravishing One retaliates to work the Stinger's back before applying a sleeper, only to release it as he thinks he has the match won. Sting fires up with a backdrop and a Stinger splash that ends up sandwiching the ref as well. Sting then places the Ravishing One in a scorpion deathlock when Harley Race and Big Van Vader would appear. The Stinger would fight them off until Rude could clip the knee and goes for the Rude Awakening, when Race would try to hit Sting with a chair, but he would duck, causing the Ravishing One to take the blow and allowing the Stinger to make the cover for the pin to become the WCW International World Heavyweight Champion for the first time. Rick Rude would get his rematch 1 month later across the pond in Japan. Sting had become the WCW International World Heavyweight Champion 3 weeks earlier, when he would head to Fukuoka, Japan, for Wrestling Dontaku on May 1st, 1994, to face the man he had been feuding with over the past few months in Ravishing Rick Rude. The match would start off back and forth until the Stinger would hit several elbow drops to take control, forcing the Ravishing One to the floor when Sting would fly out with a slingshot plancha. Stinger would continue the punishment with a vertical suplex on the ramp before delivering a flying clothesline from a top turnbuckle. Rude finally changes the momentum after avoiding a Stinger splash on a guardrail, sending Sting crashing into the steel. And the Ravishing One takes the fight back inside the ring, nailing a flying clothesline of his own, followed by attempting a flying knee drop, only for Stinger to meet him on the turnbuckles for a superplex. Rude then gets his knees up on a running splash and begins to work the ribs with a bear hug and more strikes, until Sting rallies to kick the Ravishing One in the head. But Rude reverses a suplex to drop the Stinger across the ropes before hitting another suplex on the stage area. They make their way back into the ring where they trade strikes, sleepers, and military presses that sends the Ravishing One back out to the floor, where he grabs the belt and attempts to smack Sting with it, only for the ref to grab it away, allowing the Stinger to dropkick Rude from behind, followed by a clothesline to send him out to the floor. Sting would climb the turnbuckles to fly out, but the Ravishing One would pull his valet in front of him, so the Stinger jumps down and removes her, allowing Rude to clock Sting with the title. The Ravishing One would quickly throw the Stinger into the ring, but only a near fall. So he keeps up the attack by nailing a pile driver and a top rope knee drop for the pin to become champion for the 3rd time. Unfortunately, this would be the last match of Rude's career, as he broke his back on the plancha early in the match and would be forced to vacate the title, leaving the title up for grabs very soon. Tatsumi Fujinami had become the IWGP Heavyweight Champion at the beginning of April. But now, on May 1st, 1994, at Wrestling Dontaku, he would have to face the former champion, Shinya Hashimoto. As soon as the bell rings, Fujinami is on the defense as Shinya starts kicking. Tatsumi returns fire, but Hashimoto's arsenal is too much, forcing Fujinami to roll out to regroup. Once he returns, Shinya picks up where he left off, only for Tatsumi to catch a kick and begin working several submissions, such as an STF and a sleeper. But when he tries to transition into a dragon sleeper, Hashimoto blocks and counters to regain control. Shinya would then take Fujinami to a corner with multiple strikes, connecting over and over with high kicks, before delivering a jumping DDT for the pin to become the IWGP Heavyweight Champion for the second time. Hashimoto would defend the title over the next year until a fellow musketeer would look to end the reign. Ravishing Rick Rude had won the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship in Japan. But by May 22nd, 1994, at Slamboree, he had been stripped of the title due to the use of the belt during his match, with the WCW Championship Committee giving the title back to Sting. But the Stinger refused it, saying the belt should be won in the ring, and agreed to wrestle Vader that night. The match quickly became a slugfest, with Vader gaining control to hit a pair of pump splashes and an avalanche attack. The ref would be taken out when Sting misses a clothesline, so Vader follows up with a chokeslam, while Harley Race goes to use a chair, only to hit his client instead. The Stinger would capitalize with a DDT, but gets caught going for a splash in the corner, followed by Vader power slamming him. Vader would head up top for a moonsault, only for Sting to avoid and make a cover, when Race would fly in with a diving headbutt, but the Stinger moves in time, causing Vader to take the blow. Sting would follow up with a top rope splash for the pin to become the WCW International World Heavyweight Champion for the second time. Sting would then make his way to the next Clash of Champions for a unification match with his long-time rival. Sting came in as the WCW International World Heavyweight Champion. The Nature Boy Ric Flair comes in as the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, when they would meet at Clash of the Champions 27 on June 23rd, 1994. The two men are back and forth to begin until Nate flops down face first in front of Sherry Martel, who's at ringside. Now, once back in the ring, the Nature Boy rakes the eyes and hits some chops, but the Stinger just asks for more before hip-tossing and drop-kicking Flair. Sting tries for a second drop-kick, only for Nate to avoid and looks to apply a figure four, but he's rolled up for a 2 count. The Stinger rallies with right hands and goes for a splash, only for the Nature Boy to move and going back on the attack, dropping Sting throat first across the ropes. Flair begins to work the leg as Sherry is cheering on the Stinger, making a cover with leverage, which Sting kicks out of, while Martel is telling the ref about the cheating. Nate continues with more chops and a back suplex before going for the figure four again, only to be kicked away, so the Nature Boy locks on a sleeper instead, but the Stinger escapes by ramming Flair into a turnbuckle. Sting goes on the attack with a vertical suplex, clotheslines, and a superplex, followed by heading up top for a splash, only for Nate to move in time and nail a vertical suplex of his own. But the Stinger no-sells to hip toss, drop kick, and press slam the Nature Boy, sending him out to the floor. And Sting looks to fly out with a crossbody, only for Flair to grab Sherry in front of him, causing her to take the blow. And the two men fight their way back into the ring when the Stinger would counter a hip toss into a backslide for a near fall. But Sting would then turn his attention back to Martel, checking to make sure she was okay, which would allow Nate to cradle him up from behind, grabbing the tights for extra leverage to unify the championships. The big gold belt, which had represented the international title, would move forward as the WCW World Heavyweight Championship around the waist of Ric Flair, until the biggest acquisition in the company's history would challenge at the very next show. The Nature Boy, Ric Flair, had unified the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship and the World Heavyweight Championship when the newest addition to WCW, in Hulk Hogan, would make a challenge at Bash at the Beach on July 17th, 1994. The two men would go back and forth to begin, with Nate bailing to the floor every time the Hulkster seems to get an advantage. Flair would finally get on the offensive after sensuous Sherry trips up Hogan. But Hulk fires back with a pair of suplexes, goes for the leg drop, only for the Nature Boy to move in time. Hogan continues to hit a big boot, but again Sherry interferes, pulling the ref out of the ring. Now a second ref arrives as Nate is locking on a figure four, only for the Hulkster to reach the ropes. But this allows Sherry to choke him while the ref is distracted. Hogan's friend Mr. T responds by grabbing her and taking her to the back. But he doesn't notice that she left behind some brass knuckles, allowing Flair to use them, only for Hogan to Hulk up, hitting the big boot and the leg drop for the pin to become WCW World Heavyweight Champion for the first time. Hulk Hogan would defend the title over the next year, when the son of his most famous rival would arrive to challenge. World Championship Wrestling had withdrew their membership from the National Wrestling Alliance, meaning the organization had no champion. So they scheduled a tournament to crown a new champ, bringing back the 10 pounds of gold belt to represent this. By 1994, Eastern Championship Wrestling had become the NWA's most televised affiliate, so the tournament was held at the ECW Arena on August 27th. Shane Douglas and Too Cold Scorpio had made their way through the tournament to face each other in the finals. They would go back and forth to start until Douglas hits a back suplex and applies a camel clutch, only for Too Cold to counter into an electric chair drop. Scorpio would keep up the attack with a leaping clothesline, a slingshot splash, and a missile dropkick, before attempting a suplex, only for Shane to reverse to drop Too Cold on a guardrail. Douglas would bring Scorpio into the ring the hard way, followed by a crossbody attempt that Too Cold ducks, before nailing a tombstone piledriver. Scorpio would head up top to fly off with a moonsault, but Shane avoids and delivers a belly-to-belly suplex for the pin to become the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. After the match, Douglas would talk about the history of the belt, name-dropping legends who had held it, only to throw it down, telling the NWA to kiss his ass. He isn't a man to accept a torch from an organization that died years ago. Shane continues that he is a man who ignites the new flame of the sport of professional wrestling, picking up his ECW title and declaring it a world title. Douglas would defend the Extreme Championship Wrestling World Heavyweight Championship for the next year, while the NWA would go back to the drawing board to find any sense of relevance. After Shane Douglas threw down the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship, the organization struggled to find any national relevance, but would hold another tournament on November 19th, 1994, in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Chris Candido, born 1972, is a second-generation wrestler, the grandson of Popeye Chuck Richards. Candido would begin training at age 14 with Larry Sharp, and making his debut in 1986. By 92, Chris had made his way to Smoky Mountain Wrestling, winning the Junior Heavyweight, TV, and Tag Team Championships with the help of Tammy Lynn Sitch. Candido would defeat Al Snow, Dirty White Boy, and Tracy Smothers to win the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship that day. Chris would defend the title over the next few months, mostly in Smoky Mountain Wrestling and on the independent circuit, when an Ultimate Fighting Champion would make a challenge. Bret Hart had been WWF Champion for 8 months when he would arrive at Survivor Series on November 23rd, 1994, to face Bob Backlund in a submission match. Backlund had snapped after a loss and beginning to claim he had never lost the title in 1983, that his manager had thrown in the towel, forcing him to lose. So this would lead to British Bulldog being in the Hitman's corner, while Bret's own brother, Owen, would be in Bob's. Both men go for submissions early on, only for each to block the other's attempt. When Hart would apply a figure 4, but Owen refuses to throw in the towel. So both men reverse through the hold until Backlund can reach the ropes. And the two men trade pile drivers before the Hitman goes into his finishing routine, followed by locking on the sharpshooter. And Owen enters the ring only for Davey Boy to chase him, leaving the ref to be distracted by Bulldog. So Owen breaks the hold. And Davey Boy would continue the chase on the floor, only to collide with the ring steps, knocking himself out, with Owen showing remorse and concern. But Bret just yells at him, allowing Backlund to sneak from behind to apply a crossface chicken wing. And Hart tries to fight it, but he's taken all the way to the mat, when Owen would begin crying, pleading to his parents who were at ringside to do something, that he didn't want it to be this way. And Helen goes to throw the towel in, when Stu would stop her. But Owen continues to plead to them, as the Hitman cannot escape the chicken wing. And Helen finally has had enough, and she throws the towel into the ring to make Bob Backlund the WWF Champion for the second time. Bob wouldn't have to wait long for his first defense, as he would face an up-and-comer just a few days later. Bob Backlund won the WWF Championship a few days earlier, as he made his way to Madison Square Garden on November 26, 1994, to face WWF's newest big man in Diesel, in the last time the WWF Championship would change hands on a house show. Diesel, born 1959 in Detroit, Michigan, played college basketball at the University of Tennessee before also playing overseas in Germany. After his basketball career was over, he enlisted in the Army before working on an assembly line for Ford. Diesel would make his way to the WCW power plant, making his debut at Clash of the Champions 12 on September 5th, 1990, as Master Blaster Steel. By 91, a new gimmick was introduced in Oz, before again being repackaged as Vinny Vegas by 92, teaming with the rest of the Diamond Mine that included Diamond Dallas Page, Diamond Stud, and Scotty Flamingo. In June of 93, Diesel would make his way to the WWF, becoming the bodyguard of Shawn Michaels. His first big break would be the 1994 Royal Rumble, eliminating 7 men in under 18 minutes, before also winning the WWF Intercontinental Championship from Razor Ramon. Diesel would also team up with the Heartbreak Kid to become WWF Tag Team Champions during this time as well. Diesel is a 2-time WWE Hall of Famer, individually and as a member of the New World Order. After winning the WWF Championship, Diesel would dominate over the next year till the Excellence of Execution would come looking for the title once more. Chris Candido had been the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion for over 3 months, when he would make his way to a Smoky Mountain Wrestling house show to face the Beast, Dan Severn. Dan Severn, born 1958 in Coldwater, Michigan, on a farm. He would take up amateur wrestling in high school, winning a national championship in 1976. Severn would go on to Arizona State, becoming a 2-time All-American. Dan would make his professional wrestling debut in 1992 for the UWFI in Japan, before also working in Canada and Tennessee. He would also start to cross-train in judo and jiu-jitsu before receiving an invite for the Ultimate Fighting Championships 4, where he would lose to Royce Gracie in the longest UFC fight up to that point. Soon after, the NWA would offer Severn a chance at the belt, which he would win and hold for the next 4 years, which is the third longest reign in the history of the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. While he was champ, Dan would continue to also compete in the UFC, winning a title there as well. For his accomplishments, Severn is a member of the UFC and NWA Hall of Fames. Shane Douglas had held the ECW World Heavyweight Championship for over a year when he would come to Philadelphia on April 15th, 1995 to face a former champion in Sandman. The franchise would work over the challenger early on with splashes and dropping him on the railing, when the Sandman would retaliate with chair shots. The Sandman would even go after Douglas's manager, Woman, at one point, forcing Shane to save her by flying over the ropes with a plancha. Then we returned to the ring where Sandman would miss a top rope leg drop, allowing the franchise to deliver a backbreaker and lock on a cross-face chicken wing, only for Woman to whack him in the knee with Sandman's cane, causing them to collapse to the mat with the challenger on top for the pin, to begin Sandman's second reign as ECW World Heavyweight Champion. Sandman would take on all challengers until the most unlikely one would get the best of him. Shinya Hashimoto had held the IWGP Heavyweight Championship for over a year when he made his way to Fukuoka, Japan on May 3rd, 1995 to face Keiji Muta at Wrestling Dontaku. The challenger would connect with a series of drop kicks to start, but would miss a handspring back elbow when Hashimoto would move. The two would continue to trade strikes until they took the fight to the mat, with each man applying holds, forcing the other to make the ropes. They make it back to their feet, with Hashimoto taking control with headbutts, kicks, neck breakers, and pile drivers, before going to the top for an elbow drop. But Muta would avoid and deliver a flash elbow drop, a handspring back elbow, and a bulldog. Keiji would keep up the attack with a missile dropkick, Frankensteiner, and a German suplex, only to have Shinya roll out of the way of a moonsault. Hashimoto would go back to his vicious kicks before attempting several DDTs, but Muta would block until Shinya could wear him down to finally nail the move. Hashimoto would drag Keiji to his feet and goes for a brainbuster, only for Muta to reverse into a release dragon suplex, before quickly nailing a pair of moonsaults for the win, to become IWGP Heavyweight Champion for the second time. Keiji would defend the belt for the rest of 1995, when a rival promotion would send their biggest star to New Japan's biggest show. The Sandman had held the ECW World Heavyweight Championship for the last few months, when he would make his way to Philly on October 28, 1995, to face the upstart Mikey Whipwreck in a ladder match. Mikey Whipwreck, born 1973, joined Eastern Championship Wrestling as part of the ring crew, working for free in exchange for ring time before the show. Mikey would be trained by Cactus Jack before making his debut on February 1st, 1994. By May, Whipwreck had captured the World Television title, and then by August was a World Tag Team Champion with his trainer. Mikey would continue to ascend the ranks over the course of the next year, when he would win a Battle Royal to become the #1 contender for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship, but was unsuccessful in capturing the title at first. Whipwreck would continue to feud with Sandman until winning the title, becoming the youngest world champion in professional wrestling history at 22. Mikey would move on to face Steve Austin before the former champion would reinsert himself into the dance. Hulk Hogan had arrived in WCW, winning the World Heavyweight Championship in his first match with the company. The Hulkster would defend the belt over the next 15 months until the Giant would arrive to make a challenge on October 29th, 1995 at Halloween Havoc. The Giant, born 1972, played basketball through high school and college due to him being 6'2" by the time he was 12 and 7'1" by 19. Because of being born with acromegalia. After school, he would work various jobs such as bouncing and bounty hunting before beginning to train at the Monster Factory with Larry Sharp. The Giant would meet Danny Bonaducci, who would then introduce him to Hulk Hogan, leading to the Giant being signed by WCW. He would be billed as the son of Andre the Giant, making an impact at Slamboree, being a thorn in the Hulkster side until making his professional wrestling debut. The Giant's manager had placed a stipulation in the contract for the match that if Hogan lost via DQ, the WCW World Heavyweight Championship would change hands, giving the Giant the belt in his first match with the company. WCW would nullify the title change due to the circumstances, and the championship would be vacated, putting the championship on the line in the biggest match yet. Diesel had won the WWF Championship, defending the title for the next year, when he would make his way to Survivor Series on November 19th, 1995, to face Bret Hitman Hart in a no DQ match. Bret would immediately go after Diesel's legs, but the big man would take the fight to the floor, running the Hitman into a ring post, using a chair, and attempting a jackknife, only for Hart to escape. Bret goes back on the attack of the legs with a figure four, tying the legs up around a ring post with cable and using a chair across them. Diesel would free himself to deliver a side slam and snake eyes, before trying another on an exposed turnbuckle, but the Hitman reverses, allowing him to nail a side Russian leg sweep, backbreaker, and a second rope elbow drop, sending the big man to the floor. Hart would follow out with a slingshot plancha, but Diesel would avoid before shoving Bret off the apron onto and through the Spanish announce table. The big man would roll the Hitman into the ring and goes to hit the jackknife, only for Hart to collapse, causing Diesel to hesitate, which was enough for Bret to cradle him up for the pin to become WWF champion for the third time. The Hitman would hold the belt for the next few months, when his biggest rival would make a challenge on the grandest stage of them all. The Giant had won the WCW World Heavyweight Championship in a controversial manner, so he had been stripped of the title, and the WCW Championship Committee had decided to put the belt on the line at World War III on November 26, 1995, in a 3-ring, 60-man battle royal. Brawls and eliminations galore until they were down to one ring, where Eddie Guerrero would get tossed by the Horsemen, only for Sting to then eliminate his rivals. Lex Luger then would team up with the Stinger to attack Giant, leading to Hulk Hogan eliminating all three of them out of nowhere. But the big man would drag the Hulkster under the bottom rope to brawl, while Macho Man Randy Savage dumped one-man gang out, leaving him alone in the ring, with the ref declaring him the winner to become the WCW World Champion for the first time. Savage's friends and enemies would all come looking to make a challenge, as he didn't know who to trust. After the most unexpected ECW World Heavyweight Championship win, Mikey Whipwreck would make his way to December to Dismember on December 9th, 1995, to face not one, but two other competitors in Steve Austin and the Sandman in a three-way dance. The match gets going before Sandman even arrives, as Austin and Mikey go back and forth with Matt Wrestling, before everybody starts brawling once the former champ is there. Whipwreck hits a flying head scissors on Sandman and tries the same on Steve, only for it to be countered into a powerbomb for a 2 count. Mikey retaliates with a somersault dive onto both of his opponents, but he then misses a springboard crossbody, allowing Austin to spike Whipwreck with a piledriver and a stun gun to eliminate him. Sandman and Steve then use the guardrails, chairs, and tables to inflict punishment to each other before returning to the ring where Austin's hammering away, going for a cover, only for Sandman to get a boot on the ropes. The former champion would then nail Steve with brass knuckles and making a cover of his own for the pin, even though Austin's boot was on the ropes, to become the ECW World Heavyweight Champion for the 3rd time. Sandman would defend the belt over the next month when a true poet would make a challenge. Macho Man Randy Savage had defeated 59 other men to become the WCW World Heavyweight Champion when he would make his way to Starrcade on December 27th, 1995, not knowing who his opponent would be. WCW had a number 1 contenders match between the trio of Sting, Lex Luger, and Ric Flair, which would end with the Nature Boy winning in controversial manner. So the stage was set for Savage versus Nate, where they would trade strikes, with Flair focusing on Macho's injured arm. The Nature Boy would apply a sleeper, only for Savage to break free, when Nate's manager, Jimmy Hart, would distract the ref, tossing his megaphone into the ring, only for Macho to intercept, clocking Flair to bust him open. Savage would nail the flying elbow when the rest of the Horsemen would arrive, leading to Arn Anderson delivering a brass knuckle-aided left hand, allowing the Nature Boy to make the cover for the pin to become the WCW World Heavyweight Champion for the 4th time. The two competitors would continue to feud over the next month, leading to a rematch very soon. Keiji Muto had defended the IWGP Heavyweight Championship for the past 7 months when he walked into the Tokyo Dome on January 4th, 1996, to face the biggest star from the rival promotion of UWFI, Nobuhiko Takada, at Wrestling World. Takada, born 1962, would train in the New Japan Dojo under Fujiwara before making his pro wrestling debut in 1981. He would spend his time as a young lion as Antonio Inoki's personal assistant, while also being Hulk Hogan's assistant on his Japanese tours. He would continue to work in New Japan and the newly formed Universal Wrestling Federation through the 80s, winning the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship in 86, followed by the Tag Team Championships in 87. By the early 90s, Nobuhiko would form the Union of Wrestling Forces International, which focused more on shoot style, leading to matches with boxers, wrestlers, and MMA fighters over the years. In 1995, the UWFI would begin to invade New Japan, leading to the largest crowd and gate in Japanese wrestling history at the time, in October. After defeating Muta for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, he would be the only wrestler to have held all 3 of the major New Japan titles at the time. For his accomplishments, Takada is a member of the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. He would defend the belt over the next few months when a former champion would come kicking for a match. The Nature Boy, Ric Flair, had defeated Randy Savage at Starrcade to become the new WCW World Heavyweight Champion. But Macho Man wasn't going to wait long for a rematch as they made their way to Las Vegas for Monday Night Nitro on January 22nd, 1996. Savage would attack on the floor to start, but would miss a flying double axe handle to crash into the guardrail, leading to the two men heading into the ring, where Nate would start working the leg with knee drops and a shin breaker, before locking on the figure 4, using leverage, until caught by the ref. The Nature Boy would stay on the attack with more D-drops, only to head up top, where Macho would press slam him off, followed by a pair of top rope double axe handles. Jimmy Hart would then jump to the apron to distract the ref, allowing Arn Anderson to run down to hit Savage as he is being held by Flair, only for Macho to move, causing Nate to take the blow. Hulk Hogan would then run down to yank the Enforcer off the apron as Macho flew off the top with an elbow drop for the pin to become WCW World Heavyweight Champion for the second time. Savage and Flair's feud was not over though, as they would up the ante for their next rematch. Sandman had held the ECW World Heavyweight Championship for the past month when making his way to Philadelphia to face Raven on January 27th, 1996. Raven, born 1964, would earn a degree in criminal justice and join the Marine Corps Reserves, before making his way to train at the Monster Factory under Larry Sharp. He would have his debut match in 1982, before working all over the country in different independent promotions. Raven would join WCW in 1992 as the character Scotty Flamingo, a surfer from Florida, winning the WCW Light Heavyweight Championship at Beach Blast. He would move on to align himself with Diamond Dallas Page and Vinny Vegas as a member of the Diamond Mine, before leaving the company early 1993 to head north to WWF. He would work under the name Johnny Polo, mostly as a manager, until leaving in late 94. Raven would make his way to ECW as his depressed, sociopathic self, delivering eloquent, philosophical promos and creating a stable of lackeys called The Nest, feuding with Tommy Dreamer and revealing a past with his opponent. Raven and Stevie Richards would win the ECW World Tag Team Championships in the middle of 95. But after losing them, his feud with Tommy would ramp back up to the point that they faced each other to become the number one contender for the World Heavyweight title. For his accomplishments, Raven is a TNA Hall of Famer. And after defeating the Sandman, Raven would defend the belt for the majority of 1996 until everything would be in jeopardy. After regaining the WCW World Heavyweight Championship on Nitro, Macho Man Randy Savage would make his way to Super Brawl 6 on February 11th, 1996, to finally end the feud with the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, in a cage. Savage goes crazy to start, only for Nate to go low to turn things around. They would run each other into the cage when Macho would head to the top, only to get caught in the gut on his way down. The Nature Boy would lock in a figure 4, but Savage reaches for the bottom of the cage, so the ref would pull Flair off of him. Nate would then try to apply the hold again, but Macho would cradle him up for a near fall. More cage work that would bust the Nature Boy open, that sends the cage door flying open, allowing Flair's manager, Woman, to throw powder, only for Savage to duck. So then Miss Elizabeth, another one of Nature's managers, would hand him her high heel shoe. The Nature Boy would then whack Macho over the head with it to become the WCW World Heavyweight Champion for the 5th time. Flair would defend the title over the next few months until his biggest challenger yet would come looking for a shot. Bret Hart had been the WWF champion for the past 4 months when he would make his way to WrestleMania 12 on March 31st, 1996, to face the man with a boyhood dream in a 60-minute Iron Man match. Shawn Michaels, born 1965 to a military family, grew up in San Antonio, Texas, playing football. He would begin training in 1984 under Jose Lothario, before debuting in Mid-South Wrestling. He would make his way through Dallas and Kansas City before making his national debut with the AWA in 1986, teaming with Marty Jannetty and winning their World Tag Team Championships. In 1988, the Rockers would make their way to the WWF, being stalwarts in the tag division until Shawn would super kick his partner through a glass window to cement the breaking up of the team. The Heartbreak Kid would join forces with Sensational Sherry to climb the ranks, eventually winning the WWF Intercontinental Championship in 1992 and occasionally having opportunities at the WWF Championship. By 94, Michaels would be joined by a new bodyguard, Diesel, winning the WWF Tag Team Championships, but they would soon feud after Shawn accidentally cost Diesel his Intercontinental title. The two would match up at WrestleMania 11, but Michaels was unsuccessful, and due to injury, Shawn would be forced to take time off, but would return to win the Royal Rumble in 1996, leading him to having another chance at the WWF Championship. For his accomplishments, Shawn Michaels is a professional Wrestling Observer newsletter, and two-time WWE Hall of Famer. The Heartbreak Kid would defend the belt over the next few months when a Psycho would make his challenge. The Nature Boy Ric Flair had held the WCW World Heavyweight Championship for the past few months when he made his way to Albany, Georgia for Monday Night Nitro on April 22nd, 1996 to face the Giant. The previous Nitro had seen the two team up when miscommunication happened and coffee was thrown straight into the Giant's face, angering the big man. And as the match gets going, Nate makes Giant give chase, only for him to catch Flair going to the top and press slamming him down to the mat. The big man goes for a chokeslam, but the Nature Boy blocks by tying himself up in the ropes. And after a low blow, Flair's got the Giant down to a knee to deliver a brass knucks punch, allowing him to go for the figure four. But the big man sits up, grabbing Nate by the throat for a chokeslam to make the pin to become WCW World Heavyweight Champion for the second time. The Giant would defend the title over the next few months when an old foe would make a challenge in the hills of South Dakota. UWFI's Nobuhiko Takada had walked into the land of New Japan Pro Wrestling and taken the IWGP Heavyweight Championship for his own at the flagship January 4th show. He would defend the belt in his own promotion for a few months when one of New Japan's former champions, Shinya Hashimoto, would make a challenge at Battle Formation on April 29th, 1996. Early on, Takada would continuously go for a cross armbreaker, only for Shinya to just shove him away or block every time. So Nobuhiko turns to a combo of kicks that rocks Hashimoto until Shinya turns to slaps to take control. And Hashimoto starts delivering his own kicks, a DDT and a brainbuster, before locking in a triangle armbar to force Takada to submit, making Shinya an IWGP Heavyweight Champion for the third time. Shinya Hashimoto would hold onto the belt for over a year, until the newest, powerful sensation would make a challenge. The Giant had been walking around as the WCW World Heavyweight Champion for the past 4 months, when he would make his way to Sturgis on August 10th, 1996, to face the former champion, Hulk Hogan, who had turned on WCW to become the leader of the NWO. The Hulkster's attacks wouldn't faze the Giant at first, until a pull of the hair put him in control, wearing down the champ with various holds. They would fight to the floor where each man would ram the other into a ring post before returning to the ring where the Giant would nail a backbreaker and a slam, only to miss an elbow drop, allowing Hulk to rally, but the champ would Giant up, finger point, big boot, and signals for the chokeslam. But this would bring the outsiders out to the ring, with Kevin Nash trying to use Jimmy Hart's megaphone, only for the champ to fend them off, but Hogan uses the opening to nail the Giant with the belt for the pin to become WCW World heavyweight champion for the second time. The Hulkster would defend the title over the next year, when the number one contender would make a challenge just days before their pay-per-view matchup. Raven had held the ECW World Heavyweight Championship since the beginning of 1996, but on October 5th, that title would be up for grabs in an Ultimate Jeopardy match he wasn't even involved in, as he was injured. Stevie Richards and Brian Lee would face Sandman and Tommy Dreamer, where all competitors would suffer a penalty if they were to be pinned. Everybody's brawling around ringside and into the crowd until Lee and Tommy have made it back to the ring for a running power slam and chair shots by Primetime, when he goes to run the ropes, but he's tripped up by Beulah, allowing Dreamer to recover for a roll-up for a 2 count. Tommy then blocks a Primetime slam and counters it into a DDT, only for Laurie Fullington to run in to break up the pin. Everybody's back brawling, with Dreamer and Lee heading back into the crowd, where Tommy is thrown off the bleachers through a table, while Stevie delivers a chair shot to Sandman for a 2 count inside the ring. And Tommy and Brian fight inside a men's bathroom with trash cans, beer bottles, and chairs, while Sandman's burying Stevie with tables at ringside. Lee and Dreamer continue making their way around the arena, with Tommy's head being smashed into walls, vending machines, followed by being dragged up to a balcony area, while Blue Meanie and Supernova set up a stack of 4 tables below, when Brian delivers a Primetime slam that sends Dreamer crashing through them all. Now inside the ring, Richards and Sandman are back and forth when Laurie would enter the ring again, distracting her ex-husband, allowing for a Stevie kick that only gets a near fall. Richards would grab the Singapore cane and swing away. The Sandman would duck and counter into a DDT for the pin, making him ECW World Heavyweight Champion for the 4th time. Sandman would defend the title over the next couple of months, when the former champion would return to regain the belt he never lost. Shawn Michaels had achieved his boyhood dream and held the WWF Championship for the past 8 months, when his former friend, Psycho Sid, would challenge on November 17th, 1996, at Survivor Series. Sid, born 1960, entered wrestling in 1987 after an encounter with Randy Savage and his brother, making his debut as a masked wrestler named Lord Humongous. He would wrestle in the southeast parts of the U.S. and then in Japan, before making his way to WCW by 1989 as Sid Vicious, forming the Skyscrapers with Danny Spivey, only to be hurt very soon afterwards.
Spivey.
Following his recovery, Sid would be reintroduced as a member of the Four Horsemen, moving up the ranks to have a title shot versus Sting at Halloween Havoc 1990. Soon afterwards, Sid would head to WWF, where he would help Savage and Miss Elizabeth from Attack at their wedding, leading to him feuding with Jake Roberts. Sid would enter the Royal Rumble in 1991, with the winner winning the vacant WWF Championship, entering at 29 and eliminating Macho Man and Hulk Hogan, leading himself and Ric Flair in the ring. But Hogan would distract him, allowing the Nature Boy to eliminate him. Sid would turn his attention towards the Hulkster, but would lose his WrestleMania match when Papa Shango would interfere. Sid would leave WWF over disagreements with management and return to WCW by early 1993. But before he built any momentum, he would be released due to an incident with Arn Anderson. Sid would work Memphis for the next few years, which Shawn Michaels would bring him back to the WWF to be his bodyguard. But after costing him a championship match, Sid would turn on his friend and join the $1 Million Corporation, feuding with various people over the course of 95, when he would suffer a neck injury and be out until the middle of 1996, when his intensity would be turned up to 11. Psycho Sid would feud with British Bulldog and Vader, leading to him becoming the #1 contender for the WWF Championship. which would be his at Survivor Series. Sid would defend the title over the next few months when a former champion would get a rematch in his hometown. Next week, Best of Volume 6, 1997.
So we say short list. If you listen to the show, sometimes we see a match that we really like, and we kind of all look at each other and we say short list. And this is going to be us talking the short list. We're going to cherry pick from the short list the things. Sometimes you see something and you're like, man, that was really great. But what do you remember at the end of the year? When you look at the list, what stands out? What can you see flashes of? What stuck to the ribs? And we're going to talk it.
Yep.
Music from this week's show is New Body by Audio Adrenaline and Bellbottoms by Jon Spencer Blues Explosion. And if you like this episode or any of our other ones, please go out there, rate and review us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you find your podcast at. If you go to iTunes or Spotify, do as Michael says.
5 stars or no stars. We put in the work. You're just listening.
And if you're on the YouTube, like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications.
Share, tell a friend, something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell a friend, telegraph, tell a wrestler. What is that?
Tell your worst enemy.
I have
Like,
no idea.
Yeah.
maybe you'll become friends afterwards.
If you hate somebody enough, tell them to watch
Starcade
1997 or Bunkhouse Brawl.
Hey, Starcade 1997 might not be as bad if you weren't there to watch the build.
It is.
If out of
bad.
context,
if
it might be
you watch the
interesting.
show, it might be as bad as we're making it sound.
Yeah.
But if you have any questions, comments, concerns,
Oh, I mean, I don't need any recipes for the best of Volume 6, but I don't know. If you have a favorite Dusty finish.
Basically, Philly.
I don't think we have to go to Philly as much.
Philly's not as
Not
prominent
so
anymore because ECW's got some Fed money that they can jump around and have shows elsewhere. But yeah, tell me what you thought. What's your favorite part of Dusty Finish? Who was your favorite champion discussed? I want to know.
Is Buff Bagwell your favorite wrestler? Shut up.
But you can do those things on our email at WrestlingHistoryX@gmail.com or find us on X at WrestlingHistoX. That's Wrestling HISTO.
X.
We'll talk to you next week.
Later.